Hello, and welcome to episode number 13 of Pierre the Chef. This is Christopher, and we have Steve here, as always. Say hi, Steve.
Hi everybody.
Right. And as you can see, we've got some new toys, some new technology here. Things are behaving a little bit differently. We've got some, screen, a splash screen there. We got a couple of things Steve's been working on here, to try to improve the show a little bit, hopefully.
Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. I'm broadcasting this from an encoder like a big boy. We're not doing the Google Hangout anymore, at least for the foreseeable future. We're doing this through OBS Studio, so hopefully it will give us a little bit more ability to customize and such. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, and if it just stops all of a sudden in the middle, you'll know that it killed my computer.
And then we'll have to like scramble and post another link or something, because once the stream stops, you can't pick it up at the same URL, can you?
No. Once the stream stops, you're stuck with just, it is the way it is, yeah. And
then Steve will be stuck with the glorious task of taking the separate videos and stitching them together to post them.
No, I'll just do part 2.
Take the lazy way out. That's fine.
Hey, man, can I ask you a question?
You're always doing this. You're always doing this.
I just need to ask you something.
Go on. I'm used to it. I'm used to this. We can never get to the intro without one of us interrupting the other with something. Okay, go on.
Well, I think you know what I'm going to ask.
Right.
What's with the cap?
The cap. It's an Eagles cap. Philadelphia Eagles. They finally won the Super Bowl. It's 52 years there's been Super Bowls, and they finally won their first one. They'd won championships before. The last one was in 1960. It was a couple of weeks before JFK was inaugurated, so it's been a while. But yeah, they beat the Patriots in a very, very exciting offense-oriented game, and it was a joy to behold. So it's a little bit of celebration. I wore the cap to work the next day too, actually. So just a quiet celebration.
So you decided to celebrate your team's victory by wearing a cap as opposed to, lighting a car on fire.
Right. Because I didn't want to go down to Philly, try to find a place to park, try to climb the greased street light poles or whatever it was they did. They said Crisco, and then later there were hydraulic fluid or something, because that's a good use of hydraulic fluid to keep people from climbing the things. And one of my coworkers, who actually sits right next to me, went down for the parade, and then Friday was his day off, although we were thinking it was a good thing because we were joking he was probably sleeping it off in the drunk tank in Philly somewhere. But yeah, big exciting thing, and they had the parade and the speeches, and Chase Utley, when the Phillies won the series 10 years ago, he dropped an F-bomb, and Jason Kelce went a little bit further than that with his celebratory speech. I don't know if you saw any of that with him dressed up as a mummer.
I didn't. What did he say?
He said a whole lot. It was about 5.5 minutes, and well, we won't be going into some of the stuff he went over there, okay. But he was very emphatic, shall we say. So celebration of that, because we decided we're going to talk sports today, so this works out pretty well. We have the Olympics. There's things going on, even though the time between the end of the Super Bowl and the beginning of the baseball season is what I consider typically the dead part of the sports year, because there's hockey and basketball, and hockey's all right, and I don't really care for basketball at all. Yeah. So it's kind of the boring stretch of the year. I mean, I know that you're not a huge fan of football.
No, to say the least, my friend. Yeah. To say the least.
Yeah, you're not bothered by the cap, are you?
I mean, you know what? I'll make an adjustment. It's like the new design of the Klingons in Star Trek Discovery. I'll make an adjustment.
It's not like, because it's not like a law of conservation of caps here. I mean, we normally there's just only one cap. Now we got two because there's the two of us.
Wearing a cap is my thing. Everyone knows it. They respect it. They respect me. Yeah, no, it's fine.
Well, because it was a problem, if we could only have one cap, you could always take yours off for a show.
Yeah, because, to let them see the new cap, that the fresh cap should get some screen time, and the old cap should go take a powder, right?
Right.
No, it's cool.
Something like that.
I can't, but don't you understand? Haven't you ever watched videos from people who hate me, are critics of me, and I can't take the cap off because I'm scared that people will see how bald I am underneath. I'm
Oh yeah, like I've been very worried about that. I mean, you've seen where my hairline is. It hasn't exactly been subtle.
it's
Yeah,
it's not that I just like wearing a cap. It's that, and also that I've taken it off in several videos, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It's a deep insecurity that I feel that I can't be seen without the cap. So.
Yeah. Well, you didn't wear the cap at the wedding, which I appreciate. When I got married and you were my best man, you didn't wear the cap during the ceremony, and that was appreciated.
I fought for it tooth and nail, but ultimately, good taste and friendship prevailed, and I decided not to wear it.
You know, I have made the joke more than once about how baseball is better than football because you see football players wearing baseball caps, but you never see baseball players wearing football helmets. I'm not certain that logic necessarily makes a lot of sense, but it is something I've said, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah, it works for me. I mean, baseball has the best hats, therefore it's the best sport. That is my logic, and I'm not going to depart from that.
Yeah, as opposed to a basketball hat.
Yeah, come on.
The hats they wear, they're part of the uniform, generally aren't very prominent.
It's more of a sweatband sport, really.
But sports, yes. So the one of the stories that had come out of the Super Bowl was the amount of money that was bet and in many cases lost on the Super Bowl, which, you know, it's amazing how much money is spent on this. You know, for all the things that the NFL does about being anti-gambling and not allowing players to gamble, much of the popularity of the sport is based entirely on getting people to blow their money on it. Before the Super Bowl began, because I'm watching the game and I'm sort of following, you know, I have ESPN up, so some of the Twitter feed comes up, or, you know, things they put up on the side.
Yeah.
And apparently, Caesar's Palace had taken like $500,000 worth of bets or something like that over the opening coin flip.
That makes sense.
It was running like 56% heads, and I'm like, what kind of person has the money to bet on the opening coin flip?
Well, a person who needs to go to Gamblers Anonymous, my friend.
Apparently, it's just insane how much goes on, and that's why the NFL has its injury report, that they have to publicize who's injured, who's likely to play, who's not, and it isn't really based on keeping people, you know. Like in baseball, if your pitcher's going to be injured, you know he's going to start. It's a game-time decision. You don't have to announce it. But the NFL, you have to announce it. You can actually be fined for not publicly revealing your injury report properly. And that whole thing is for gamblers.
Yeah.
That's the whole purpose of the injury report. You know, Vegas, I don't know. When you see like the things on the lines on the games and stuff, that technically is not how much they think the team's going to win by. It's how much they think they have to skew the results to get 50% bet on each side.
Yeah, yeah.
It's ugly. And now they're moving a franchise to Las Vegas, so that should be interesting.
I'm sure that'll be fine. That'll work out just fine.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. I was watching. I watched. It came out last year, but just a couple weeks ago, I finally got around to watching the 30 for 30 episode about the XFL, which was Vince McMahon's misbegotten professional football league that he started in 2001, I think.
Yeah, he's going to bring that back.
He's bringing it back because
he's going to be the owner of all the teams, so proving collusion is going to be pretty easy.
I think the owners are all in it together. Yeah, because, you know, if Vince McMahon has shown us anything throughout his career, it's that he can learn from mistakes. And one of the things that they talked about, and it was just a little...
He can learn. He just has to be more emphatic about making them, and it'll turn out right.
Yeah, exactly. He'll definitely course correct. Well, there was because one of the XFL teams was a Las Vegas team. The Las Vegas Outlaws, and they interviewed this guy. They found like the one guy in Vegas who was still like a huge Las Vegas Outlaws fan, you know, like 16 years later. And
so proud.
Yeah, well, that's what he was like. I can't believe that they shut down the league after one season, because finally, after all these years, Las Vegas, we finally had a football team. And I felt so bad for the guy, because it was like, but you didn't. It wasn't even a real football team. I mean, it was, but it was basically, it was like, it was a couple notches below getting a CFL franchise, for Christ's sake. I mean, it's like, surely you have other sources of football that you could go to watch. Like, there's nowhere in Las Vegas you can go see a live football game or within driving distance. I find that hard to believe. They had a football stadium. What were they doing with it before?
Yeah, there aren't football teams everywhere the way there's baseball teams everywhere. Football doesn't have a minor league system like baseball does.
Right.
Or hockey or whatever. You sometimes see like arena football leagues, and there was locally we had I think it was in one of the arena football leagues back before the entire league collapsed. We had a team in this area. And I think there was one that was up at the stadium that at the time was the Phillies AAA team, and now it's the Yankees AAA team. That's a couple miles up the interstate here. They had football periodically for a little while, but nothing has ever really been that. Nothing's ever really been that long lasting. You know, nothing. They're all kind of transient in a way, because outside of the NFL, not much survives in the way of football leagues.
Yeah, it seems like for whatever reason it just worked out this way, that the NFL seems to take the college game as sort of a feeder. You know, like college teams are the feeders to the NFL, whereas in baseball it doesn't. In baseball there are obviously they take college players, but it's very rare for a player to go straight from a college baseball team directly to the major leagues. Even they have to filter through the minors for a little while. Yeah,
because the level of competition, the level of play at the professional level, at the top major league level in baseball, is very similar in football. In football, it's very similar in college and the top level of the pros, the major leagues. In baseball, the talent level, the difference is enormous. When you leave college, you are generally not ready to play in the majors. I mean, even the number one can't miss top prospects in baseball usually take a year and a half before they get to the majors. I mean, there are exceptions, but for the most part, there is a learning curve from college to the majors in baseball that doesn't exist in football or basketball.
Yeah, well, and I think part of that is also, you know, with baseball, it's almost an entirely different game when you go from one level up to another. I mean, when you play baseball, and I'm by just full disclosure, I've never played organized baseball at any level, so I'm speaking purely as an observer, not as an athlete.
I was on a team. I was on the high school team for 2 years. I wouldn't necessarily say I played, but I was on the team for 2 years. I got one at bat, and I struck out on 3 pitches on a Saturday morning JV game. And afterward, the assistant coach who was there told me that the main coach wasn't going to play me anymore because of the length of my hair, because the length of the hair is what, you know, really separates the pros from the scrubs. I always wonder, if I hit a home run in that bat, would have I gotten a different message from him?
I'd love to play you, kid. Just cut your hair.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you play as a child in little league and pony league and that sort of thing, and then you move up to your high school team, like, that's a jump. And then when you go from high school and you decide to play in college, that's a jump. I mean, even to the point where when you're younger, I mean, almost all youth baseball leagues and high school baseball leagues I've ever seen, they all use aluminum bats. And that's a major difference, because when you get up to the professional level, there are no aluminum bats. So that tool that you have mastered all up to about age 18 or so to learn how to play this game and be a good hitter, now you have to learn how to use a completely different tool that has different weight, has different sweet spots, has functions in a different way.
You have the aluminum bat that you can get jammed on and still hit it over the fence, and then you switch to the wooden one where you get jammed on it and it saws the bat off, and you're there holding a stick this long.
Exactly. A good aluminum bat, you can hit a home run off the handle. Like, you can hit it. It can hit like 2 inches above your fist, and you can, if you hit it just right and you're swinging good enough, you can get it to go over the wall. But I mean, yeah. So, but with football, it's again, just as an observer, and especially with football, not even an observer. I barely pay any attention to football at any level. But it seems like the game, in its basics, is about the same. Like, when you learn the rules and you learn to play football when you're a little kid, that knowledge carries over you know, all the way through. And obviously there are jumps in skill level, but it's the same basic game.
Yeah, running routes can be a little bit more detailed. You have a bigger playbook you have to learn, but the fundamentals, you don't learn to throw a better breaking ball in football. You know.
Yeah. You don't have to play with a completely different kind of ball. You know, like a football is a football.
But yeah.
You don't have, here's the aluminum football, kids. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, now there's a concept. The
and I want it to be solid aluminum, and then we'll see. Then we talk about concussions. Whoa. Yeah.
Oh man. But yeah, part of the reason why I had thought this would be a good topic to discuss, but before we get into the rest of the Olympics and so on, is that some years ago, a friend of mine and I were having a debate about the value of sports. And this is James. He does the he's not on Facebook a whole lot anymore. He does the Transglobalist thing. Maybe we can put a link or something. I can send that over. Hey, free plug, James. But he's over. He's in Africa right now, bicycling across the continent. Actually, he's posted a couple videos along the Atlantic Ocean, sunset on the Atlantic.
Wow.
Anyway, he is a man of strong opinions, and I agree with a lot of them, disagree with some, and he does have this unfortunate thing where even if you agree with him, he can sometimes become very aggressive if you don't agree with him. And they're strongly enough. And we were discussing sports. We were disagreeing on this, and he was talking about how they don't contribute anything, they don't provide anything. I didn't try to have the debate with him because he had asked something along the lines of, what value that I challenge you, I defy you to prove to me what value, what contribution sports provide. And I didn't get into that with him because he had stated at one point that watching the Super Bowl was essentially directly supporting terrorism, which is a bit ridiculous. And I figured if that's a position he was taking at that point, then we weren't going to have a productive discussion, so I didn't try. But the question is stuck in my head. And with this and with some of the other organizations, the Olympics and was it FIFA? FIFA,
yeah. I don't know how they pronounce it.
I would say that the problem is not with sports; it's the big business aspect of it. As with so many other things get corrupted when big money gets involved. And most of the problems you have with sports, most of the issues that come up socially with sports, have to do with money, not with the sport itself.
Oh, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, I think, and especially when you're dealing with situations like, well, I mean, it's bad enough in professional sports where the athletes are paid for their playing, or paid for their labor, essentially. That's what it is when you're playing a sport for money. That's your labor is you're playing the sport. Yeah. And at the high level, at the professional level, you know, Major League Baseball, NBA, NFL, I mean, the top players make a fortune. But but there's, to say the least, but there's still that issue of, yes, but do they make, even though they make such a huge amount, do they make their fair share? You know, is it really fair for people who own the stadium and own the trademarks, you know, to make so much more money than the people who are actually out there playing the game?
Yeah. And it especially when they made the taxpayers pay for their stadium.
yeah. I mean, can we get some? Can we get some money from the team? Well, and the other, but when the same problem exists when you're dealing with amateur athletes, because amateur sports are still a huge moneymaker. I mean, college sports are a massive moneymaker. The Olympics are a massive moneymaker. And in those cases, the athletes, at least directly, and in many cases, they're also blocked from indirectly profiting from it. You know, they're kept from seeing any of that money. And it all the revenue that they generate through their athleticism goes to completely different people.
Yeah, the NCAA is, most of these sports managing organizations like this are incredibly corrupt. There's something I think wrong with a sport that's like college football or college basketball, which are the two big money makers, that are annually literally billion-dollar industries, and coaches get paid. You know, some of the top head coaches can get paid like $5 million or more. The highest paid public employee in something like 40 of the 50 states is a basketball or football coach.
Yeah.
And the players are not allowed to see a dime of this. A player can be suspended for receiving improper benefits if the coach takes him out after the game and buys him a cheeseburger. One person, I think he was a wrestler, he released a rap and he used his own name in it, and the NCAA came down on him saying that his name is something that he cannot profit from because the NCAA has the rights to it while he's a player within the NCAA.
Yeah,
I forget the exact details of it, but yeah, they said he's not allowed to use his own name. There's a problem.
Yeah. I mean, there is a problem but I guess their rationale is, well, you know, once he's no longer playing for an NCAA team, then he can have his name back. But there's still something a little skeevy about, you know, hey, yeah, you didn't use your name in that song, did you? Yeah, is that okay? No, actually, it's not. Sorry.
And the amount of money that goes into these, I mean, the Olympics have become just an unbelievable waste of money for wherever it's held. They need to build all sorts of new infrastructure. They build new arenas. I mean, you need a new 15,000 seat outdoor stadium for table tennis or whatever. And
people love table tennis. Yeah, there needs to be space for people to watch it.
And then all of these structures, all these things they build are abandoned afterwards and just sit there and rot. It's an incredible waste of money. And the things that they do, the way they displace people who live there for the benefit of the Olympics. In soccer, they're building football, soccer. Is it in Qatar? I think that it's being held in a couple of years.
Oh,
and they have like essentially slave labor building stadiums in the 120-degree heat and dropping dead. People are dying, and it's essentially slave labor. And this is apparently okay. It's because there's money involved. It's hard to comprehend just how horrible some of these organizations are, and you really can't blame the players because they just want to play the game. They aren't responsible for the infrastructure, for the for all the nonsense that goes on behind the scenes, for all the money exchanging hands. I mean, didn't the one person high up in FIFA actually go after John Oliver?
Yeah. Yes. How dare you tell people about the things we're doing?
Didn't he call John Oliver an ignorant American?
Yeah, which, I mean, may be correct in some sense, but most people would maybe quibble with that. Like, he wasn't born here. Well, and you know the thing, because I've been watching the Olympics, the Winter Olympics as they've been going on. I've watched almost nothing else for the last week, and I think what happens is, because you say it's not the athlete's fault, like the athletes just want to go out and play, and that is, and of course that's how they market it, you know. Mm-hmm. If you bring up concerns about these behind the scenes issues, about the corruption and the commercialism, or if you question even more fundamental aspects of the events, like the nationalism that it encourages, or like the fact that maybe, because they pitch the Olympics, this is another thing I wanted to get into about sports, that sports in theory is a lot better usually than sports in practice, because people who are like super big sports boosters, big sports fans who are like apologists for sport just in general and won't hear any criticism of it at all, who are sort of like the opposite of James that you were talking about, you know, they talk about, oh, sports brings people together and sports unifies the world, and everybody comes together and they compete, but it's with good sportsmanship, and everybody, and it's like, yeah, in theory that's the way it's supposed to work, and if it really worked that way, that would be fantastic, but that's not the way it actually works, and you can't pretend that that's how it works. You know, when it clearly especially when you pit country against country in these incredibly competitive and prized events like the World Cup or the Olympics or whatever, it doesn't seem like it's bringing people together across borders. It seems like it's giving them another reason to view those people over there as enemies, you know, because you
Yeah,
want
or
your
like,
team to win.
yeah, you're wearing the red and silver. You're wearing the maize and gold. Obviously, and yeah, so your enemies. There's a certain tribalism about it, I guess would be the right word for
Yeah.
it. Even within the United States, I mean, Yankees and Red Sox fans, you know, are at each other's throats. This is not exactly bringing people together in the way that we're supposed to believe that it's happening.
No.
And then you have and you're right about the Olympics, about how the one bit of, there's a lot about Olympic coverage that's bothered me, but I've never really been thrilled with, welcome to the Olympic coverage. Let's go straight to the medal count.
Yeah, because that's what it's about, right? It's about competition in the name of goodwill. And by the way, we have more medals.
Yeah,
you know, or the
we're United States is 4th in gold medals, but 2nd overall.
You know what, my favorite, I saw this last night. I was watching it last night because, again, despite all the criticisms, like I will and can levy against the Olympics, I've been watching them religiously, and I've been having a great time doing it. But I did notice last night, because of course it's the Winter Olympics, and Americans, except for a couple of events, like just suck at the Winter Olympics. We're awesome snowboarders. And we're pretty good skiers in certain events, but once you get past, like, speed skating, forget about it.
Yeah,
but
you are the worst curler I've ever seen.
I mean, why do we even step to the Canadians in curling? We should just let them have it. But they did the medal count.
Embarrassing for us, wouldn't it?
We can't even sweep in front of rocks good. I mean, but they had the medal count last night, and of course, Norway was like way ahead on everything. Norway has the most golds. Norway has, I don't know if they have the most silver or bronze, but Norway is way ahead in the medal count of everybody. And United States was like tied for 5th. And we had 4 gold medals and, like, you know, I forget how many silvers and bronzes. But then the anchor in the NBC Olympic studio said, but the U.S. also has 9 4th place finishes. So those were 9 times when we were just half a second away from getting a medal. And I'm like, really? That we have to make ourselves feel better by saying, if they gave a 4th medal, we'd have 9 of those. Like,
yeah, and Norway would have 14, so
yeah,
it's not helping.
come on, yeah. So in like a short track event where like every fucking skater is Norwegian, they would have even more medals. But yeah, it's just, that's a really good point. I never really thought about that before. But where they preach, you know, oh, it's about the sport, it's the spirit of competition and camaraderie, and by the way, here's who has the most medals.
Yeah,
you know?
It's not about winning or losing. It's about participating and contributing and good sportsmanship. Now let's check who won.
Yeah. Well, and the Olympics are a great example of what I was talking about, because if you look at the Olympic creed, the Olympic creed is beautiful. The Olympic creed is a wonderful set of values. It's where the Olympic creed says it's not important. Winning isn't important. It's showing up. You know, victory isn't as important as the struggle. I mean, it's just these beautiful values, but that's not the way it actually works. And it's the way maybe it should work. It's the way that we would like to think that it works. It's the way that it works sometimes. But to pretend that, like, to take this gauzy romantic view of it and be like, oh, the Olympics, it's, you know, I'm not saying that you shouldn't enjoy them, because like as I said a couple of times, I'm really enjoying them. But you can't exactly, you can't pretend that they're just these completely innocent, wonderful things that, oh, it brings the world together. When, I mean, you mentioned the slave labor in Qatar, you mentioned, and the nationalism, the colonialism, the fact that when the Olympics started, they were very much an instrument of colonialism. It was very much, you know, the Western countries saying, look how great we are. You know, and it has expanded throughout the world in the last couple of decades. There are many more games that take place, you know, in Asian countries or African countries or in the Middle East than ever used to historically. But even so, you know, the whole idea is a little bit of a colonial relic. That has been modernized as we've moved on. But I mean, it's not immune from criticism, and certainly the governing bodies are not. I mean, Christ, this year, these Winter Olympics, there is no official Russian team. And it's not because the Russians boycotted, it's because they were kicked out because they had a huge doping scandal. So the Olympics, the actual International Olympic Committee, had to choose the clean athletes from Russia itself and say, we're going to put you all in a new team called the Olympic Athletes from Russia, and you'll compete under the Olympics flag, not the Russian flag, because your actual Russian Olympics committee was so corrupt that we had to kick them out this time. You know,
I will say that at least they still allowed the people who weren't responsible to compete,
yeah.
which is what they should do. Yeah, but remember, the Russians will cheat at the Olympics, but not at American elections.
No, of course not.
Silly.
They had nothing. Okay, maybe they did interfere in the election, but they didn't affect the result. I'm guessing. I'm just going to say that. I don't know.
Well, who needs facts? Yeah, as far as the Olympics go, and for the tremendous expense that it is, and the amount of damage that it can do to the places where it's held for, like you said, the huge expense and the outlay and what it does to, displacing people. Do you, like, the ideas have been floated of either, like, semi-permanent sites for the Olympics or not having all the events in one place at the same time?
I'm open to the idea that there are better ways to do it than the way they currently do it, because, yeah, I mean, the displacement, the huge cost of the host country,
it's not like the luge track gets used a lot after the Olympics are over.
Well, can't we get Elon Musk to build like a collapsible luge track? I mean, you know what I mean? Or
he can put a car in space. You think he might be able to do that?
Yeah, can you do something practical? But yeah, I mean, the truth is, when you watch it on TV, it doesn't matter where the fuck they are. I mean, if they decided to say, okay, let's pick 4 permanent sites for each games, for the summer games and the winter games, and we'll just go from, they'll just rotate on a cycle so that you don't
there's going to be some infrastructure already in place.
Yeah.
That would be, I think that'd be reasonable than building everything from scratch every 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it in terms of...
But then there's less opportunity for graft and corruption and people lining their pockets because it's the big money.
Exactly. If we're not going to build an Olympic stadium, what are we going to do with our lives? Yeah, I mean, when you think about it in terms of sustainability, it's kind of outrageous that you think every 4 years, every 2 years actually, because the games are staggered and the winter games and the summer games are in different locations. Every 2 years you have this major world event, and then in most cases the facilities that they spent all those billions of dollars to build are either torn down or abandoned. I mean, they might find a use for them, for a little while. Like, the Olympic Stadium in Montreal was the home ballpark for the Expos for a while. The Dodgers played in the LA Coliseum for a while, and football teams have played in they've found uses for it. But in many other sites, that is not the case, and it does seem a little wasteful. And you think, like, well, let's just pick like 4 or 5 cities that are major world locations, and maybe pick a major city on every continent for each games, and say, okay, we'll move, we'll have the games on a different continent every 4 years, but it'll be the same cities on that continent each time.
Right. I recommend that the Winter Olympics, that Antarctica do Winter Olympics and not summer.
Summer games in Antarctica would be awesome. Are you kidding me? Can you imagine track and field with everybody bundled up? Like the record, nobody would break any records, but goddamn, that would be fun to watch.
Well, the Russia had the Sochi Olympics, and they had the Winter Olympics in a place with palm trees.
Yeah, because in
a country that has Siberia.
Hey, Russia's going in for the Winter Olympics. Where do you want to have it? Oh, in our resort town. Okay, apparently they did that because it's where Putin likes to vacation. He was like, I want the Winter Olympics. Yes, sir.
Let's have it in the warmest spot possible.
Yeah.
The downhill slush.
I'm not wearing a coat to the goddamn Olympics. We're going to have it in a place with some nice weather, okay?
Yeah, but as far as the value of sports go, I mean, I still enjoy surfing, and I don't enjoy basketball. You know what? I used to watch basketball during the Olympics, and then they allowed the the professionals to play.
Oh.
And after 2 or 3 games of the score after 1 quarter is USA Dream Team 76, Zambarian Republic of Africa 3, I said, you know what? I'm done with this.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much the end of me watching basketball. But as far as what value they provide, I would think that in many ways it's the same as any other form of art or entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it provides in a lot of ways the same thing that books or movies do. And you can get very much overpaid for doing movies, just like you can very much get overpaid for doing sports, because our capitalist culture kind of has an inverse relationship between how important a job is and what you actually get paid for doing it. But there is, you know, the value of that. It's just again, it gets corrupted when the dollar signs get involved.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it's an interesting comparison between sports and art, because they are very similar in a way. And if you play sports, if you are an athlete, I think there are obvious good things that you can take away from it, both in terms of your character and also just practical things. I mean, if you are a talented athlete who comes from you know, a low-income background, and you make a ton of money as an athlete, like, that changes your life. That changes the life of your family and your friends, and maybe your entire neighborhood. You know what I mean? Depending on how civic minded you are and how much money you make, like, it can really make a difference. And the sports franchises in certain ways can you know, lift up communities, and there are wonderful good things about it. And it's if you find a sport that you like and you really gravitate towards and you really attach yourself to, it's a great form of entertainment. You know, there's something about the Olympics. I don't know what it is. I think it's just some kind of social conditioning that I have become susceptible to. But I will watch sports during the Olympics that you couldn't pay me to watch any other time. And like for the Winter Games that are ongoing, I've watched more hockey in the last week than I have in a long time.
In the last 4 years.
Yeah. And had a great fucking time. I was up, my wife and I were up until like 1 o'clock last night watching Germany versus Norway in a preliminary hockey game. It wasn't even for a medal. It was a preliminary game. It was just to decide what the seeding is in the group. You know what I mean? And we were like on the edge of our seats. It was awesome. And I was thinking, like, is this how hockey fans feel all the time? Like, how do they stand it? It's emotionally exhausting because it's so quick, and it's like, oh my God, you know? And I guarantee you, in a month, if I sat down to watch like an NHL game, I'd be like, I might be into it for a couple minutes, and then I'd be flipping around for something else. But there's something about the Olympics that just, it's like, oh, this is so important. And I'm just riveted, and it doesn't matter what I'll watch people. I hate snowboarding. I think people who snowboard are fucking douchebags. But I mean, when Chloe Kim won the gold medal on the half pipe, I was like, yes, you know what I mean? It was one of the most thrilling things I'd seen in such a long time. So, you know, as my good pal and podcasting partner Jason Harding told me when I told him about this phenomenon last week, I'm a mark. That's what I was. He said, "So you're a mark?" I was like, "Yeah, I guess I'm a mark."
And you're okay with that because it only comes into play like once every 4 years.
Yeah. Yeah,
or 2 years.
Every 2 years.
It makes sense that they finally staggered it, because for a while the summer and winter were the same calendar year, and they finally adjusted that, which was, I think, a good thing.
And it only took them, what, like 80 years?
Something like that.
It's something 60 or 70, because the first winter games were in the 20s, I think, and then when they finally staggered it was in 94. They did a Winter Olympics in 92.
They said we can't have this Goodwill Games crap going on in the off years. We're going to deal with that.
That's why they did it. They did it to fuck Ted Turner. They said, no. None of this Goodwill Games bullshit. We're going to put the Olympics on every 2 years. Do something about that, Ted.
Sadly, that there's probably some validity to that.
Oh shit! Yeah, I'm sure there is. I mean, I don't find it at all difficult to believe that Ted Turner pissed off someone at the International Olympic Committee, and they were just like, you know what? Fuck him. We're going to change the whole schedule of our shit just for that.
That's petty, but entirely believable.
Yeah. Ted Turner apparently has that effect on people. I mean, the guy, he tried to colorize black and white movies, so to me, he'll always be kind of a dick. You know?
And the technology really wasn't there to colorize them realistically.
Yeah, no, not at all. Ted, this is going to look like we just colored over the film with magic marker. Are you sure you want us to do this?
The Beatles' Plaid album.
Yeah.
So
sports.
I've covered most of what I wanted to say as far as sports go on this. I think most of what I had coming in. Yeah, so I haven't got a whole lot else left. I mean, we went over the gambling aspect, the social aspect, the money aspect is big, and we managed not to trash it completely. We managed to say something positive. Even we did talk about people dying as slaves somehow in a discussion about sports.
Because you know, our goal going into this was we wanted to ruin sports for people, and just whenever you're enjoying yourself watching sports too much, just think about the slaves that are building the stadium in Qatar, and it'll bring you right back down to where you need to be.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah. Just don't we want to make sure that you never enjoy anything. Can I ask you a question? This just occurred to me. I can't believe I didn't ask you this before.
Hmm?
I think it was the hat. It was the cap that put me off. Where the fuck is Pierre?
He bet heavily on the Patriots, so if he's not ducking me, he's ducking Toby in the bets that he hasn't properly covered yet.
Oh shit! If he owes to Toby Benson, he's in trouble.
Yeah, is Toby around? He can ask him.
I haven't seen him lately. I think he's out. He's the Olympics are a busy time for him because obviously he likes to watch because he is a big sports fan, and then he's conducting business, so. And he's very paws on with his business. So.
He's got some he has to identify the Olympic marks who aren't part of his normal clientele.
Yeah, exactly. Which I mean, I learned the hard way, right? You don't want to get involved with that.
I seem to remember seeing a little something about that.
Yeah.
Is there a surgery involved?
There maybe was there. I mean, you can look, if you owe, you can pay, but sometimes it costs. You know what I'm saying? It costs. Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess I'll forgive that. So here's a sports related question I can ask you, since we have a little bit of extra time, because we covered the topic with unheard of efficiency for our program.
Yeah, we didn't go wandering off onto all sorts of other tangents like we normally do.
Not yet.
We're saving that for the end.
What? Yeah. Why is it, in your opinion, this is kind of a sports-related question, why is it, do you think, that people, and this, I'm thinking primarily of baseball, but it happens in other sports too, why is it that fans and governing bodies and just the sort of the sport in general it seems like we're more willing to forgive athletes who use performance-enhancing drugs than we are to forgive athletes who are caught gambling? Like, why is it that gambling is the unforgivable sin, whereas performance-enhancing drugs is sort of like, oh, yeah, don't do it, but it's not, you know what I mean? Like, it's not an automatic lifetime ban.
I think that my best guess on this is that performance-enhancing drugs are something that the only influence is try to help yourself win, whereas gambling can have the opposite effect on your team. Like even today in baseball, you're not allowed to gamble on baseball games at all. You can't even gamble on your team to win. Right. And an example that I got, and I'd given this example some years ago, like if back when the Yankees had Joe Torre managing and Mariano Rivera as their closer, suppose that Joe Torre's betting on the Yankees to win, and he bets on them to win, say, on Sunday, but not on Saturday. And he's had a bunch of close games. He used Rivera on Wednesday, he used him on Thursday, he used him on Friday. Mm-hmm. He's got a one-run game on Saturday. Is he going to use his best closer for a fourth day in a row and then know that he probably won't be available for a game that he has money riding on?
Yeah.
he could hold back the player and not try to win that game or not make the best chance to win that game because he's worried about what's going to happen for the game that he's gambled on. And so in that sense, gambling on games, even gambling on your team to win, can cause you to lose games because you're managing not to the game but to the gambling.
Yeah.
I think that's where that comes from. It's performance-enhancing drugs. You're not going to, unless you injure yourself because you blow something out or whatever, you get suspended. Performance-enhancing drugs aren't going to cause you to consciously lose games the way that gambling can.
Yeah,
that's what I would say would be the explanation for that.
That's a good. It's a good reason, and I mean, it's not that I don't get why gambling is bad, because obviously I'm 100% on board with the don't let the players or the coaches, gamble on the game that they're playing. It just makes sense. Like, why would that? Because this kind of scenario you just described, even if they're betting on their team to win, it would still pollute the outcome. But I don't know. I've always got the feeling that when owners especially or leagues implement like anti-PED policies, that it's always grudging. They only do it because they feel like they have to. We would, well,
the baseball union did that. They put that in, but they actually got such a sweet deal that they had it work out that the players knew that the testing would happen in spring training the one year.
Yeah.
And that as long as the testing was below a certain level of positives, that they would be free and clear and they'd drop the issue. And the players, given like 4 months notice to get clean before spring training, still managed to come nowhere near the benchmark to get this to go away.
Yeah.
They knew it was coming. They knew when it was coming. It was coming in spring training when they had the entire off season to clear their system, and they still couldn't do it.
It's one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite sports stories in a dark sort of way, because just all they had to do was pass one test, and the issue would have gone away, if not forever, for a long time. And they couldn't do that. The steroid problem in baseball was so bad that even with advanced warning of a test they knew was coming, that they knew they'd only have to pass once, they still blew it.
That's impressive. That's a sign you got a problem.
And even after that, the major leagues were slow to implement serious reforms. I mean, wasn't it, there was I can't remember what the current policy is, but even now I think there is no automatic lifetime ban, is there? It's always up to the discretion of the commissioner.
I think so. I know that the penalties increase, and I think if a third or fourth test, you start getting suspensions of a year or more.
Yeah.
And at that point, you're without actually having a lifetime ban. If you're some 25-year-old who's taking drugs because you're on the cusp, but not necessarily quite good enough, and then you miss an entire year for something like that, that is not career-ending, but it's close.
Yeah, it's not.
it's an unofficial lifetime ban.
Yeah, it's for all practical purposes. You're probably not going to get to play again.
It's the A-Rod ban.
Yeah, good old A-Rod, who ruined it for himself and for everybody else. My favorite part about the A-Rod thing was when Ken Griffey Jr. came to the end of his career, and I saw multiple write-ups, like sort of glowing tributes to Ken Griffey Jr. and they were all with the same underlying theme, which was basically, we wish it was you. Like, we wish that you had broken the records that Barry Bonds broke. We wish that you had been like that A-Rod level superstar. If you had been healthy, if you had been able to play, at your top level for your whole career. Oh God, Griff, we wish it had been you. Because you have this one guy who was set to be that guy, was set to be that superstar level player, and in his early healthy years was one of the biggest stars baseball had for a very long time. And then unfortunately he just wasn't able to live up to those expectations, and in came the steroid gang.
Yep. But since you mentioned that, let me go one thing that I thought of. It's not directly about the industry itself, but it's something about sports here. You mentioned the home run record.
Yeah.
Hank Aaron,
Yes.
how my opinion has changed a little over time on an issue with him. I assume, as a baseball fan, you've seen the footage of him breaking the home run record when he hit number 715.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And he's rounding the bases, and the announcer is going nuts and won't shut up. He's a record breaker. He's rounding second base.
Yeah.
Shut up. And then people are coming out of the stands and shaking his hands as he's circling the bases. You see one or two guys run up with their somewhat goofy 70s styles and stuff. And I remember the first time I watched it, I laughed. It's like, well, that's really good. I mean, people feel so supportive. They want to just, I mean, it's stupid because you're going to get arrested and you're trespassing and so on. But I thought that was great. And then I'm hearing about how Hank Aaron, after he retired and he was getting older, and he got kind of standoffish, kind of hostile. He was kind of bitter about things and didn't, not necessarily being the ambassador to the game. He was sort of just hard to get along with, hard to get close to, and I'm like, why are you being so resentful? I mean, you're the home run record holder and so on. I wasn't really thrilled with what I was hearing about the person that Hank Aaron had become with all he'd accomplished. And when I was 12, 13 years old, that's what I felt about it. And then time went by, and I remember when I was younger, we would go out sometimes when my parents got paid, go out and cash the checks, and there'd be different places that we might go out, since we had a little bit of money to spend. And there's a place, a used bookstore, actually, where we would buy some books that were a bit cheaper. And I got a lot of Star Trek novels there, actually, for under the cover costs. And, of course, some were good, some were terrible. And that's where I was introduced to the Amityville horror books. And I remember we got some of them, and I was really impressed. Then time went by, and I read them and was like, wow, this is complete bullshit. It's like, but one time I was going through, I found they had like a Guinness Book of World Records, I forget, like 79 or something, because I know at home we had 73 and 86. But, looking through it, it was a bit different. And there was an entry in the Guinness Book about most fan mail received, and the record holder at that point was Hank Aaron. And I don't remember the exact number, but it was between 1 and 2 million letters per year.
Yeah.
And that was back before the internet. That was back when you either had to put pen to paper, or you had to get your manual typewriter and type out your letter,
right,
and then put it in an envelope and find the address to send it to somehow and put the stamp on it and mail it. And it talked about that. And I'll never forget, the last line of that entry was, about a third of the letters were hate mail. Yeah. Bill Lee had written a book that I got at one point, and he said so Hank Aaron and some other people got a lot of letters in that era that would begin, dear N-word, and then turn nasty. I mean, some vicious letters. And then Hank Aaron finished, I forget exactly, he finished the one season with like 712 or 713 home runs, and the record is 714, so he was right on the cusp. So instead of getting it out of the way, it had the entire off season to percolate and for people to get ready for this and to build up to it. And the vitriol against him started becoming really, really hostile. I mean, he received death threats. His family received death threats. He got letters telling him that if he hit the home run and he tried to circle the bases, that someone in the stands would shoot him before he could cross home plate, so that he wouldn't break the record, so that it could still be held by a white man, because that's the important thing here, right? Yeah. And the season started with a road trip, so they benched him for most of it because they wanted him to break the record at home. So he comes home to Atlanta, and he hits the home run, and he's circling the bases, and we see the footage, and guys coming out of the stand to shake hands and congratulate him. And I realized something that never occurred to me when I first watched it. Here's a man, this should be the top point of his career. This should be the greatest moment of his career. Yeah. Baseball is a sport of numbers and statistics, and 714 was one of the sacrosanct numbers, up there with 2130. 714 home runs. Babe Ruth, I mean, that was considered one of the untouchable records of all time. And Hank Aaron has hit the home run. He's dedicated his life to baseball, to being the best player he can be, and he's accumulated the most home runs. He has broken the record, and he is circling the bases, and he should be on cloud nine. This should be the greatest moment of his professional career. And as he's rounding second base, and he's got fans running up to him, the thought, you notice in that video, he's not smiling. Yeah. The thought that has to be going through his mind as he's circling second base is this man going to try to kill me? Yeah. Yeah. And how can that, if that is your reality, if that's the way that you have to think, if you have reason to look at the world that way, how could you not become embittered?
Yeah.
40-year-old me watches that footage and doesn't laugh the way the 13-year-old me did.
Yeah.
It's not amusing anymore.
No. You know, something similar happened in the final years of Jackie Robinson. He started to have a reputation of being bitter, you know, and being ungrateful for all of the wonderful things that his career and his celebrity had given him. And Jackie's problem, it wasn't really a problem, what people perceived as a problem, was not just the abuse that he suffered during his career after the integration, which was unimaginable, but from his perspective, the game did not really continue to progress after integration, because many more black players, of course, found their way into the major leagues and became great stars in the 50s and 60s. But it wasn't until, I think it was the 70s, before there was a black manager, which was Frank Robinson. Frank Robinson was actually the first black manager in the National and American leagues, because they just said, well, we want a black man, let's hire the first black manager. So he actually had the distinction of being the first black manager in both leagues.
Which is kind of sad in a way.
Yeah, it's like he's a great player and he was a great manager, but you really, nobody he was still, the record was still there to be broken in the other league by the time he was available. But that's what Jackie Robinson was really upset about, because he of course appreciated the importance of having black players on the field, and appreciated his role in history, and was very grateful to see all of the other men who had taken the field after him to, you know, make baseball a much more diverse sport on the field. But he also knew that ultimately, if there weren't black people managing the teams, and above that, if there weren't black executives, general managers, owners, etc., then the integration would really only be superficial, and that's not what he wanted.
That might be another value of sports, that it's a reflection or a microcosm of where society stands at a given time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So,
I mean, one of the things that made news this past season with the NFL, the Giants starting quarterback Eli Manning had started like every game for over a decade, and the coach, the team's head coach, is in over his head and was throwing him under the bus, and actually finally benched him for a game just to start somebody else, just to pretend that he was doing something to try to help the team win. And the quarterback that he put in, a man named Geno Smith, was black, and he became the first black person ever to start at quarterback for the New York Giants.
Wow.
Every other team had a black quarterback. The Giants had not, and honestly, Eli shouldn't have been benched. So technically, the Giants still shouldn't have reached that point in the way they did. But it's just shocking to think that it was the year 2017 that one of the very old NFL franchises had their first black person start a quarterback. That's kind of mind-boggling.
Yeah, it shouldn't be treated as a milestone. It should be treated as something to sort of be embarrassed about. It's like, why is this still a thing that can happen? Why are we marking this? Why didn't this happen 50 years ago? Or, you know,
right?
Yeah,
it's just a odd anomaly, I guess, to some extent, because I know that in the like late 80s, early 90s, when the Phillies were just an absolutely terrible team, they actually made national news because somebody noticed when they went on a road trip that the entire 25-man roster was white. And the team did do some things to try to shake things up, because there's the thought that if that happens, then there's probably some institutionalized racism within the organization. Some people are possibly losing their chance at a career because somebody who's doing evaluation somewhere in the organization is dismissing people simply because they're black. I mean, I understand that the Boston Red Sox, as late as the 1970s, had gotten a scouting report on a player that described the player as a nice colored boy.
Yeah.
So we want to pretend things are great, but they're really, really not.
Well, yeah, I can't think of his name now, but the guy in the 80s who was he was fired from the Dodgers, because he went on Nightline and said, well, you know, black people are just better athletes genetically. They're not good at being general managers or managers, but they're really good athletes. They're just
was that a Howard Cosell thing, or was
no,
that...
it wasn't Howard Cosell. He was a guy, he worked for the Dodgers, and I think it was Ted Koppel had asked him. They were talking about the lack of black executives and you know, managers.
Is that what Keith Olbermann had written about, something about was that Roy? You're talking about Roy Campanella? Somebody had roomed with Roy Campanella, or
yeah, I
don't remember now.
He was an old.
Yeah, I read about this because
I can't think of his name.
Yeah, but I mean, he was a teammate with the first black player in the major leagues, but he went on record stating that he didn't think that black people would be good as executives.
Yeah, like they weren't smart enough, or he did that condescending thing that men do to women sometimes, where they're like, well, blacks are they're just good at different things. You know, that horse shit.
But this is where the change is generational. There were people, you know, 50 years before him who would never play baseball with a black person. He had no problem with it, but he could only get to so far. He got to this level, but it takes the next generation to start there and to move to here, and so on. You know, these sea change is generational, and he did his part, and then reached a point where he was an impediment, and other people had to come along and do better.
Yeah. I wish I could think of his name. But that was just in the 80s. You know what I mean? Like that wasn't something that happened in the 50s, a few years after Robinson. That was an attitude that was still very prevalent in professional baseball at the major league level.
I would think that there's, to some extent, it's still prevalent. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Neither would I. I mean, it's not as if we're not sitting in a position as a country, as a culture, where we can say at any level that, well, you shouldn't expect to see racism. I mean, racism is obviously still very prominent.
Post-racial America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
All right, so we've made sport. Have we ruined sports yet?
I think we have. But for a good cause. These are things that I think people should be mindful of. Even if you do enjoy sports and you like to root for your favorite team or go to a ball game. I mean, you should be able to enjoy it, but you shouldn't use your enjoyment of the sport as an excuse for, being ignorant and blind about important issues that are raised around it.
The Negro Leagues are not a disgrace, but the fact that they had to exist in the first place was a disgrace.
Yeah, exactly. You can be proud of them, but you also have to be mindful of the fact that in a just society, they would never have had to exist in the first place.
That's why Richie Ashburn, Phillies legend, always said that he played baseball during the best era with the highest level of talent, after integration but before expansion.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so speaking of issues of post-racial America, is this a part where we have to do our 5 minutes of Trump?
I think we probably should, I think we probably should.
Yeah. Now, I understand that part of the reason that we've switched platforms here is so that you can do some fancier things with this, because we have never had an on-screen timer.
That's right.
It's been a running thing.
I think this is the episode where we finally retire our second most treasured running joke. Which is
second most.
Which is the lack of an on-screen timer for 5 minutes of Trump, because Oh
dear God!
Oh, see, there's his little face.
There's his cheery, happy face.
Oh God, what an asshole! There's his little face.
For that man.
Oh, I know. People voted for him.
And they weren't all Russian bots. Some of them actually meant it.
Some actual people voted for him. Yeah. So there's I will, when we start the 5 minutes, you'll see a little 5 minute countdown underneath his giant baby face. And we'll talk about Donald Trump for 5 minutes. Are you ready?
As ready as I ever am. I mean, that's about all I can say on this.
Okay. Here we go. When you see the countdown start, just start. There's
going to be a countdown. Fingers crossed.
It'll start at 5, and it'll just go from there. Here we go.
You don't screw this up and have it count up from 5.
No, it's counting down.
It's counting.
5. See?
Counting down. All right. We have got a on-screen timer.
Oh, ye of little faith.
You're not my hero. That would be overstating it.
Thank you.
But But this is good. This is good.
You
All right.
hold me in a certain level of regard. Yes.
So, it's still like, what can you say about Donald Trump? There's been another school shooting, because we could have talked about that, but honestly, school shootings happen like every 60 hours in the United States so far this year. So, like, we could do 2 shows a week on school shootings. So we didn't do that this week. But he showed up and he did a photo op, and he's giving a grinning thumbs up.
Yeah. Like you do when you're meeting with grieving parents and children,
Yeah.
He also praised the first responders because apparently their response times were record-setting and everyone's talking about it.
Really? Is anyone talking about like the victims?
No, we're all very proud of the record-setting efficiency of our first responders.
Well, they have so much experience.
Yeah, they get plenty of practice because of people like Donald Trump and his dog shit political party. I also want to point out, in terms of his response to the school shooting, did you like how because of course his first public response was he tweeted about it. And did you like the way he implicitly blamed the neighbors and the friends of the shooter for not reporting him? He said, everybody knew he was a problem. You have to keep reporting these things. He's like a scolding parent who wants to completely escape any responsibility for something that their kid did. Yeah, you knew it was a problem. You have to keep on it. I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
It
was reported many times.
And laws that were intended to try to prevent people with certain mental illnesses from having access to guns. There was a law, and Trump repealed it. So
yeah,
I don't know where you get off blaming mental illness when clearly you're not concerned about the role of mental illness in this.
No, the mental illness thing is just a dodge.
I am so sick of hearing that. That is so insulting and such an attempt to change the subject. It's like, I mean, where else do you suddenly switch and blame something completely different than what actually happened?
Well, and there
was an accident up on 4th Street. A drunk driver ran off the road and hit a tree. Well, it's that damn mental illness. It's not alcohol.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and other people have pointed out that let's just pretend that we want to say it's mental illness. I don't think mental illness is really the root issue, but let's just say that it is. Black people suffer from mental illness. Women suffer from mental illness. Mass shooters statistically are almost never non-white and are almost never women. So if it's just mental illness, if that's the common factor that we need, if that's the nut we need to crack to really solve this mass shooting problem, why is it that only people in one particular demographic are the ones who become mass shooters, and other people who suffer from mental illness issues just the same don't seem to take this don't take it into their head to grab an assault weapon and go start randomly killing people. It seems like there might be a little bit more to it than that. And also, not only did Trump repeal a law last year that would have made it more difficult for people with mental illnesses to get guns, but his newly released budget proposal cuts funding to two federal agencies that supply resources to mentally ill people. So, sounds like he's just coming up with a scapegoat to avoid saying it's the fucking guns, to me. That's just my read on it.
You never blame the guns because, if they didn't have the guns, they would find some other way. As I posted, they would use, I'm sure they could kill just as many people just as quick with their sword or their quarterstaff or their semi-automatic bow and arrow or whatever the hell people think kills people as fast as an AR-15.
That is the most asinine argument. Like, well, they would find some other way. Well, shouldn't we make it as hard as possible?
You know what? I'm all for that. Let them find another way. Let's try to draw the line on this one so they can't kill people this way. Let them find another way, and then we can deal with that one separately. But right now, this is what's happening. Let's deal with it.
Let's go down the list. How about that? Let's just take care of the guns. If people start stabbing people, then we'll work on that when we get there. Real quick before the timer runs out, we also should mention he praised his White House aide who was forced to resign because it turns out he's a serial domestic abuser.
Well, just about everyone in the administration is.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, what's Trump going to say? It's terrible? He does it himself. Oh, time's up.
Oh, wow. It says time. It doesn't go to 0.
Isn't that amazing?
Wow, you went all out.
I just want
But it's gone. Yes. Don't have to stare at his face anymore. That was nice. I like this.
I deserve all the praise for coming up with a way to do something that is just like a basic thing that people have been doing on webcasts for years.
You've been taking the blame for the lack of timer because of me for like the first 12 episodes, so it's only fair that you get the credit since you're the one who resolved the problem.
That's after a year I resolved the problem. Yay.
High five.
Yay.
We don't have we can work on that barrier thing.
We'll do I'll come up with a split screen and we can do like a high five thing.
Yeah, all right. That's a lot of work for not much. So we're probably not going to do that.
We'll do it once, and then I'll wonder why I spent so much time on it.
Yeah, and you know we'll botch it. We'll line it up all wrong, and we'll just be.
Yeah, it'll be like I think Captain Disillusion did that in a video where he had two versions of himself, and they went for a high five, and he did like an intentional miss, and I was like, it was probably a lot easier to do it that way, huh?
Yeah. So we got a little bit of time left.
Yes.
I did something that I do not normally do. I actually binge watch a television show.
Ooh.
I know people talk about they go on Netflix and they'll watch like the entire season of The Office in one day or something.
Yeah.
I've never done, even shows I have trouble watching, a lot in a row. But I actually made an exception. I've finally seen Star Trek Discovery.
I did not know this. This is news to me. We did not. Oh, you kept this from me.
Yes, I did. You mentioned it earlier in the show, and I'm like, I could say something. We're not going to. I'm going to bring this up later.
Oh, this okay.
I did not watch your video about because I wanted to come in blind on this.
That's good,
as far as
because it had. Yeah, that's good. Well, then we can have a fresh argument about it.
Because I think that it was good, but not great, and I think it did some things right, and I really liked it, but it did a couple things very wrong, I think, as well.
Yeah.
And
well, generally speaking, that's where I land on it. That's where I land with it as well.
One thing I liked was the different structure, not just the fact that it was serialized, but the fact that it essentially had a prequel pilot episode.
Yeah.
The show is called Star Trek Discovery, and the ship does not show up or is even mentioned until the third episode. There's like a prelude to explain what you're coming into. It's a very different thing, and you wouldn't have done that with any other iteration of Star Trek, and I really thought that was a different and interesting structural approach to it.
Yeah, I liked that as well. And again, just because it was different. One of the things that I appreciated about the show from beginning to end was they were at least willing to try things. Everything didn't work, and there were some things they tried that I felt like, I don't know where you're going with that. But I liked the fact that they were willing to try things that Star Trek hadn't done, which was something that I think the TV franchise was desperately in need of.
Okay, yeah. Rick Berman was like, I've got a Mad Lib, just plug in the word, we got a new episode.
Yeah.
At the end, he was just cashing the checks.
Yeah, I mean, even when they did Enterprise and they were like, this is going to be bold and fresh and new, and after a couple episodes, it was like, oh, it's just Star Trek.
Yeah,
but like, Discovery really had an ambition to be like, yeah, we're going to do Star Trek, but we're going to try to find some different things to do with it. And I really appreciated that.
And I also like the fact that they, not only did they have a gay couple on the ship, but they didn't do a very special episode to talk about how this is not an issue and should not be a problem. Right. It was just something that was presented and was taken as a matter of course, and no one talked about it. It was. And I like that, and I'm watching it. And in the early going, some of the only scenes of basic humanity were the two of them, because the show really did not have a lot of levity to it, and a lot of it was just people's pain and mistakes and hostility bouncing off each other. And here you've got these two people who are just brushing their teeth in the morning and being normal people, which this show really lacked. And for God's sake, they're both dead.
Yeah.
But good. Not exactly. I suppose I should have mentioned that this is going to be spoilerific, just like Star Wars last time.
That's right. If
I
you're watching,
I apologize.
If you're watching and you haven't seen Discovery, we might spoil some things for you.
And of course, people should be used to that, because the people watching are like, for God's sake, they talked about Star Wars for 30 minutes last time, and now they're talking about Star Trek for 30 minutes. Hey, we got to be us.
You know what I find interesting, and you are as familiar with this phenomenon as I am, is, I think we both have said that we like Discovery. with reservations. There are things about it that we didn't like, but there are also things about it that we really liked. There are some of our fellow Star Trek fans. I don't know how large of a percentage of the fan base it is, but it's always a very loud percentage that absolutely hate it, that think it's the worst thing ever, and it's not Star Trek, and it ruined the franchise, and I can't believe they did this, and I can't believe they did this. Yeah, yeah, like, I like good Star Trek, like Voyager. Come on. Okay, you're entitled to your opinion, but now I'm going to stop listening to you. I mean,
nothing Discovery did could have topped One Night in Sickbay.
I mean, yeah, come on. It's like, and look, I don't want to make anybody feel bad for liking any kind of Star Trek, because even though I'm super critical of it, and I say over and over again it's my least favorite show, I could sit down and watch an episode of Star Trek Voyager right now. It doesn't offend me. It does. It's perfectly acceptable Star Trek, and even a lot of Enterprise is the same way. It's just, you know what? It's got Scott Bakula in it. I don't care. I'll watch it. You know what I mean? I don't hate it. And if you think it's great,
they gave a great actor nothing good to work with.
Yeah, exactly. I just get, you know what? Worst case scenario, I get to sit there and look at Scott Bakula for half an hour, or for an hour. It's like, so I'm not trying to say if Voyager or Enterprise is your favorite Star Trek show that there's something the matter with you, or I think you're a bad person. That's more power to you. It's just not my favorite. But with Discovery, it really seems like there are people who absolutely hated it because
it was different and unfamiliar, which was largely the point, because this is something that Star Trek needed to do, because they'd basically been doing the same show for like 15 years.
Yeah.
And it ran its course, and they kept going with it and kept pushing it. Actually 18 years, because the Next Generation was 7, and then Voyager was 7, and then Enterprise was another 4.
Yeah.
So for like 18 years, they were trying to do essentially the same show. So Star Trek really needed to do something new, and in a lot of ways they did. A couple of minor details before I get to one of the major problems that I had with it.
Yeah.
Minor details that aren't game-breaking, just things that, observations. Yeah, I don't understand the new Klingons. I don't know why they did that. I honestly don't. It's not a game breaker, but it's weird, and there's never quite a reason for it that I understood.
I think the way the show turned out, it doesn't feel as meaningful as I think maybe they wanted it to when they first came up with it. You know what I mean? I mean, as far as like the different look and the different, the sort of the aesthetic changes, I didn't expect there to be any explanation for that. I didn't expect them to say like, well, here's why the Klingons look different. I expected it to be what it turned out to be. This is just the way they look now. Yeah, it was a retcon. It was just,
Enterprise shouldn't have explained it either, but
no, it shouldn't have, because everybody knew the reason was that they had more money and they wanted to do a different character design. They wanted to put more makeup and make them look more alien, and they did it. And I feel like, in the same way with like the technology, the ship design, a lot of people were like, oh, but this isn't the way ships looked in, Kirk's era. But it is now. It's a retcon. They changed it, they updated it,
that's another thing. The design of the ship, I don't understand exactly the design of Discovery's saucer section with the separate rings that spin independently, but only when they're using the spore drive, which was not part of the original design of the ship,
and which they're apparently not going to use anymore. So
we'll get to that. That was one of the things that's odd. It's not a game breaker.
No.
It's like, okay, it's a head scratcher. I don't understand it, but whatever. There's another one that's going out of my mind here.
Those are
timeline. They said that this was in the original timeline because they didn't want to put it in the new Kelvin movie timeline.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want to run the risk of having things shot down because they wanted to save it for the movies or whatever.
Right.
But let's be honest, this is timeline 3. This is not either of the other ones. This is completely new.
Well, I mean, if they say it's Prime Universe and original timeline, I accept that. Again,
It's not something that came up at all in the show, really. I mean, people are complaining the ships didn't look like that. That's not what. No, it wasn't. So just assume it's a new timeline and be done with it. It's
Yeah.
nothing to worry about.
Or just as I said a couple seconds, just assume it's a retcon. It's just they changed it, and it's like, well, this is the way it is now. For the purposes of this show, this is the way it is. Maybe someone will do another Star Trek show in another 15 years. Well, they'll be like, I want things to look like they looked in the original series, and that's how it's a show. It's a show, you know, like it's yeah. But anyway, go ahead.
And one of the big one, I think. They did do a number of things different in this show, and that's great. But for a show that has defined itself since the 1960s of boldly going where no man has gone before, they certainly spend a lot of time going back to the well, don't they?
Yeah.
I mean, Harry Mudd showed up.
Yeah.
He was, in the original show, he was like a scoundrel who was trying to benefit himself. But you never got the impression that he was the sort of cold-blooded killer who could create a time loop and kill the same person dozens of times just for fun.
That was pretty dark. Yeah, that was pretty dark.
Yeah, so it's like a different character with the same name. I don't... because it was such a huge part of the story, obviously, take it for what it is, but there have been six Star Trek shows so far, and... they have gone to the same mirror universe in 4 of them now.
Yes, that's right.
Let that go.
Yeah, we've seen enough.
If you need to do alternate universe, there's plenty of fertile ground to do new things. You don't need to keep going back to the exact same universe every single time. You don't. Yeah. This, and then of course the season ends with the Enterprise showing up. Like, you can't have Star Trek without the Enterprise. It's like, you're trying to do something new. Stop tethering yourself to everything old.
Yeah, I can see where that would be a problem. I mean, it touches on a little bit of a problem I had, of one of the larger problems I had with the show, which was, and we touched on it a little bit with the Klingon stuff and like the design of the Discovery with the, you know, the spinning inner ring and all that stuff. There were multiple things that the show introduced, either in terms of new designs or new just concepts, or plot lines in the show that were really promising, that they never really followed up on in a real satisfying way. Like the storyline, the story of Volk / Ash Tyler.
Yes.
Which is this, you know, he starts out, he's a Klingon, and then he is transformed into a human, and it's apparently for some nefarious plot where he can be an infiltrator and allow the Klingons to win the war, but that doesn't ever really end up going anywhere. You know, he malfunctions, I guess, because he falls in love with Burnham, you know, and when L'Rell tries to bring him out of it, she's like, oh, you know, it's not working. You should have been, you know, the prayer should have woken you up. But it feels like a really interesting idea that they just never quite worked it out, you know, and maybe they had bigger plans for it. Maybe as they wrote the show, things went in different directions and they just never quite were able to work that out. But it feels like, oh, that could have been a really interesting idea, and it just kind of peters out, and it's just sort of, oh, okay.
Right.
You know?
And at the end, he stays with the Klingons, which is a way of taking a very potentially complicated and interesting character with a lot of depth and just writing yourself out of it by having the character disappear. Yeah,
and I guess the way they did it, well, we can bring him back if we need him, but he won't be an everyday presence.
Right.
Well, and there was another part of the Klingon War in general. I felt like one of my, and I mentioned this in my review video. The Klingon War felt like so much of it happened off screen, and it was something that our characters talked about a lot and referenced as being this really important thing, but we didn't see, we saw almost none of it. So that after a while, that felt like it was starting to ring hollow, because you see Burnham, especially for her, like that was such a motivation for her redemption. You know, I inadvertently started this war and now I have to end it. I have to save the Federation from this thing that I accidentally started, and you see almost none of it. And, you know, it starts to ring a little hollow. Where you're like, wait, all these people are doing all of these things, taking all of these risks to win this war that we know almost nothing about, you know?
Yeah, I can sort of see that, although it does also sort of strain credibility in some cases where, like, the same 5 people are responsible for everything that happens in the entire universe.
Yeah.
Like, Star Wars had that problem. To an extent, Babylon 5 had that problem.
Yeah.
It's somewhat good to have a situation where these are the main characters that we're following, but they're not in the center of absolutely everything.
Yeah.
So I can see it. I can flip it that way too and not have a problem with it.
Yeah, and you know, that was a problem. That was one of the problems I had with the J.J. Abrams movie, with the first one, was they did like the Muppet Babies thing, where it's like, oh, they've all known each other forever. You know, like, you can't just have, like, it can't just be, oh, Kirk met McCoy when they were assigned to the same ship. It's like, oh, no, they met each other the first day of Starfleet Academy, and Spock was there too, and Uhura was there too, and it's like, can't they just have met when they got on the ship? Like, isn't that how it usually works? You know,
in real life, yeah, but it's not real life. I will say, I'm still, it worked for what it was, but I'm still not entirely sold on Captain Lorca and the revelation there.
Yeah, I thought that was actually, I mean, I know I've talked to people who said they saw that twist coming.
I didn't.
Not
even close.
I didn't. That's what I thought was so great about it, because I saw the Klingon thing coming. I saw the Volk Tyler thing coming, which, I mean, after a couple episodes, how could you not? They really started to foreshadow that really heavily, and it was like, okay, I know what this is. And also, that was like a really popular fan theory that turned out to be true, so that wasn't like a huge surprise. But then in that same episode, they hit you with the Lorca reveal that he was from the Mirror Universe all along, and I was like, oh, holy shit! You know,
which was, in a way, it was a shame, because you've got a captain who's a bit of an asshole, which you haven't really seen before as a main character, and then turns out, oh, well, he's not human, he's Terran human, so yeah. it kind of wipes that clean in a way.
And again, the storyline with him, even though it is resolved, it winds up not really going anywhere. I mean, he pulls this long con to try and get back to the Mirror Universe by assuming his alternate's life, and then coming up with this complicated scheme to use the spore drive to get back to the Mirror Universe to take over the Empire, and then basically he winds up he stages this very short-lived rebellion and just gets killed. And it's like, oh, that seems like we traveled a long way for not very much, you know?
Yeah, it's yeah. And then at the end with the spore drive, it's like, well, now that you've got something that has made warp drive obsolete and is going to completely change the nature of the show, and so, oh, we're not going to use that anymore because blah, 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 whatever reasons.
Yeah, they just sort of wrote it, which you knew they had to do, because they had already established that it's prime universe, and, you know, that would be too big of a change. And you knew that, and they kind of set that up by showing how difficult it was, you know, to use with, you know, you have to have a living operator, and they kind of set that up, but it did feel sort of like, oh yeah, they're not going to use it anymore. Like the actual resolution of that storyline is like Stamets just saying, oh yeah, Starfleet said they're going to work on it, but for now we're just not going to use it. Oh, okay.
And did you entirely buy the resolution of the Klingon War too, with the bomb in the planet, and basically they're going to unify because they've got the sort of Damocles hanging over their heads?
That felt rushed to me. That felt like they realized that they had one episode left, and they didn't want the war to carry over to season 2. Or go unresolved. I'm not sure how much of the show they had finished when they got their renewal, because there will at least be a season 2. But the season, I'm pretty sure they had finished production when they got that renewal notice. So maybe they wanted to just have the Klingon War resolved by the end of the season, just in case it was a 1-season deal. And I feel like they were just a little rushed. They're like, okay, how can we resolve this war storyline without just having the Federation beat them? You know, let's come up with a somewhat clever way to do it. And it felt really rushed. It felt like, you know, it felt like a scene from a Babylon 5 episode, but not in a good way. You know what I mean? Where like they resolved this incredibly complicated storyline with one conversation and one little bit of plot, where they're like, here's the thing that you need to end the war, take it, you know, and good luck, goodbye.
Yeah, because resolutions, finales are a difficult thing to pull off properly, and so I respect that. But you had your your Klingon spy just wandering off. You have the spore drive is just suddenly not going to be used anymore. You have this war where the Earth is getting clobbered, and then they decide to fall back. It's like everything just sort of ended because it was the last episode.
Yeah, like I say, I mean, there were things about it that I really enjoyed, and overall I did think it was a good season and a good show. But yeah,
it's easier to focus on the negative here, unfortunately. But,
yeah, well, and what people have to remember is, Star Trek TV series in general have a history of taking a season or two to really get going. So and for a show like this that has such promise and has so many fresh new things, at least for Star Trek, that did work for me. And has such a great cast. I mean, the actors are just fantastic.
I wasn't sold on the person who did Sarek. Most of them I was okay with, but Mark Leonard was was Vulcan, but he was warm. Yeah, this guy is just sort of clay faced and reciting lines.
Yeah, well, Vulcans are tough. You know what I mean? If you look at how many Vulcans have been portrayed in Star Trek, and there's really only 2 or 3 memorable ones. I mean, it's a tough character to play. I didn't think that the actor who played Sarek in the movies quite nailed it either. I thought he was probably a little closer than the Discovery version, but he didn't quite get there either.
I think if he had been in this, he probably would have done better. I don't know. I feel like he was the person who they did cast didn't bring any life to the character.
Yeah, and other than, I mean, that was another thing that I think some people complained about, and this one is maybe I'm more apt to consider this a valid criticism of the show, which was it didn't really do a whole lot to justify its being set as a prequel. Because and the people who have a big problem with the aesthetic of the show or with the different look of certain things, they could say, well, if they had just set the show post Voyager, then all of that would have been explainable. They could have, well, the technology is just improved, and that's why everything looks different. But because it's a prequel, people have to sort of wrap their head around, why do things look different than they used to look?
Because production values have improved in 50 years.
Yeah, just watch some Mystery Science Theater and just repeat to yourself, it's just a show. I should really just relax.
Watch classic Star Trek and laugh at the production values, and then say, why are they doing this now?
Yeah, why doesn't it look like this?
Those paper mache rocks.
Yeah, but there is a quality to it, and some of this is fun. Some of this I think works, but like the Enterprise reveal at the end didn't really bother me as much as it bothered a lot of people. I thought, oh, that's neat,
it didn't bother me for the ship looking different so much as it just bothered me. It's like, do we really need to use the Enterprise as a hook to bring people to come back? You're trying to do something new. Why is your draw for season 2 we're going to do something old?
Yeah, I agree with that, and I feel like a lot of the prequel setting, it felt like whether this is true or not, whether this was their actual intention, I don't know, but it felt like it was set as a prequel in the period where it's set, because it allowed the creators to play in the sandbox. And even though they were doing a lot of new things, both structurally and tonally and a lot of other ways that Star Trek has never really done, they set it in this era where it's just pre-Captain Kirk. It's roughly in the era where The Cage takes place in terms of the year. And it gives them a chance to play in the sandbox where they can reference the Enterprise. They can have Sarek or other characters from the original series come in. They can have their main character have this tie to Spock, and it feels like they're playing in the sandbox. And some of that doesn't work because it feels like it's not really justified by story. It's just sort of, oh, they just wanted to do a show where Sarek was in it because they thought that would be fun, and it doesn't quite pull it off. But there are other aspects of it that I think work really well. But it just like I said, the prequel thing and the different look of things don't bother me at all. It took me a couple episodes to get used to the new Klingon look just because it's so different. But once I made the adjustment, I was like, okay.
They went from all being long-haired warriors having no hair at all.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And one last thing on this, I guess. Do you think that for want of a better term, the other Captain Lorca will show up at some point?
I was thinking about that. I mean, it's possible. I mean, they left it open. They never said that he was dead, you know. And
yeah, he probably is, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Well, and I mean, Christ, if you could get Jason Isaacs to come back, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I mean, if Jason Isaacs wants to do season 2, like, fuck yeah. Even if they did kill him off. Well, he has a twin brother. I don't fucking know. Like, yeah, you can come back, you know?
Well, you figure he ended up in the other universe. Goodness only knows, but he could have, nobody knows what happened to him, so he could have done anything.
Yeah, I haven't heard...
The door's open. The door's open.
Yeah, and all I've heard about season 2 is that there's going to be one. Like, they haven't made any announcement about casting. They haven't made any announcement about what the number of episodes, what the story will be. All we know is it left off with the Discovery rendezvousing with the Enterprise, and that's it. And there's going to be a season 2, but we don't know anything else. So maybe Lorca will come back, maybe he won't.
Wouldn't it be a kick in the ass if it picked up 2 years later and the Enterprise is nowhere to be seen?
And they were all talking about that awesome adventure they had with the Enterprise. It
was never actually seen. Like the episode 1, the practice episode. Yeah, it's just something that's always referenced, but nobody ever knows.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I guess I had one last thing, or one other mention on this. Do you remember? I'm sure you do. All the nonsense when the casting was first announced about the 2 women in command, and neither of them were white, and white genocide, and all this gnashing of teeth and whining. Yeah. And it turns out that you still had a white man as captain for most of the series. Yeah,
so take it easy, racists. It's not as bad as you think.
Yeah, and then in the end, the captain was not even human.
Yeah,
I didn't hear much bitching about that. No. It's okay if they're aliens as long as they're white aliens, I guess.
So he's played by a white guy, so it counts.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way,
talk about so much ado over nothing.
Yeah. Well, that's the way that's the way it always is. I mean, people have to realize that when they started Deep Space Nine, there was a segment of the fan base that I don't remember them being quite as bitterly opposed to it as the people who are opposed to Discovery are, but there were
That's because the internet wasn't up and rolling yet, so there wasn't as many avenues for them to get their hatred out.
But there were people, I mean, well, when Next Generation started, there were people who hated Next Generation because they didn't think that Star Trek was anything other than Captain Kirk and Spock and Dr. McCoy, and then after Next Generation caught on, after a couple of seasons, then Deep Space Nine started, and it's too dark, it's too self-serious, it doesn't take place on a ship, it takes place on a station, it's boring, it's too political, it's too much like a soap opera, blah 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 blah. There were people who didn't like it, and they said this isn't Star Trek, Gene wouldn't have, fuck Gene is dead and Star Trek is better for it. There, I said it.
I'm with you.
He was a good idea man and a terrible writer, and that's just the way it is. And as soon as Star Trek was taken from his hands and given to more talented people, it got way better. So there.
Yep.
But there were people who every successive reboot or reimagining or new generation has had segments of the fan base revolting and saying this isn't Star Trek, they ruined Star Trek, blah blah blah. And in 15 years, if Discovery gets a decent run, it will be accepted, and then the next thing will be given the same treatment. That's just the way they go. And the nice thing about the people who were pissed about the diversity in the casting is that it turned out to be yet another example of how fucking irrelevant those people are. Because the show itself was very successful, and the Star Wars movies that they pissed and moaned about were record-breaking. Black Panther is going to break so many records at the box office, and is getting really great reviews.
Oh, yeah.
So
that was a good movie.
I'm going to see it tomorrow. I haven't seen it yet. I'm going to see it tomorrow morning.
Well, then I'm glad I didn't suggest we discuss that instead, because we wouldn't have gotten very far.
That's what the internet needs, 2 white dudes discussing Black Panther.
But yeah, the casting in Discovery was a lot more balanced as far as race and gender, as opposed to being at least 75% white guys like it traditionally is.
Yeah, it was definitely an improvement. Yeah, and but to speak about the cast, just one more quick point, and then we can wrap it up. I loved the diversity of the cast. I liked pretty much all of the characters that they established. I wish that we had gotten to know a little bit more about. There were so many scenes on the bridge where you only knew the names of 2 of the characters. You know, where they had all of these other characters, and they were all very interesting looking people. But, you know, until the last episode, I think it was Detmer, the redheaded lady who was sort of the helmsman, and she had the cybernetic thing on her head after she was like injured, I guess, in the Battle of the Binary Stars. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't catch her name until like the last episode. And I thought, you know, she seems like she has an important job on the ship. And they keep cutting to her. Like, she's featured in a lot of shots, even though she doesn't have very many lines. And she's not treated as like a central character. She's still like a familiar face that they cut to again and again. And it's like, we could maybe know her name. You know, there's not a sense of cohesion among the crew. Like they're
well, that's because, like I said, there were very few scenes of the characters doing anything but bouncing their anger and hostility and various pains and tragedies off each other.
Yeah.
And then whatever the plot needed. You didn't have many scenes of people just living.
Yeah. Or of them working together, which was something that I think probably my favorite episode of the season was the second to last episode, because that was the one where, or maybe was it the third to last episode? It was the one where they were at the end, they made it. It was the Yeah, it was the second to last episode. It was the one
I think they got 2 episodes after they came back.
Yeah, it was the one where they made it back from the mirror universe.
Okay.
So it was the third to last episode. Anyway, it was the one where they made it back to their own universe. And that was an episode where for the first time in the show, really, you had the entire crew working together. You know, where Stamets came up with a plan to, you know, we have to harvest the spores, and we have to, you know, we're going to do a special kind of jump that's going to go whatever, or we're going to use the last of our spores, so it's like one shot we have left, and you know, and Saru has to, you know, blow up the power core of the Imperial, and Burnham has to beam back at just the right, like they have to work as a team. And it was kind of thrilling because you had never seen them all join together and cooperate like that, and it was really exciting.
Sorry.
No, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say that was probably one of my favorite parts of Star Trek Beyond. Once they got off the planet and they're all working together to try to figure out. I mean, it's the third movie; they need to start working as a crew, as a team, and it was the first time we really saw it.
Yeah, I agree. So that's why Star Trek Beyond was my favorite of the new movies so far, because it really felt like classic old school Star Trek, where they're like, everybody knows their jobs and everybody's coming together. And it was like an overt theme. Like, I think, you know, Scotty says, you know, those are our friends back there, we can't just leave them. And Sulu says, you know, they're gonna come for us. You know, like there's a feeling of camaraderie and cohesion that is really necessary, I think. Like, even in Deep Space Nine, as fractured as that got, like there was always a sense of love and friendship and devotion among the crew members that really held it together.
And we got that at the end with Discovery.
Yeah.
I will also say that the ending of that, I was glad, as much as it sort of petered out, I was glad that they didn't cheat, because when they showed that the Klingon Empire was basically winning, or had won, I was really expecting some sort of cheat. You know, they're going to go back the 9 months and fix everything. Especially since they had to introduce time travel with the second Harry Mudd episode. I was really worried that they were going to reset button it, and I'm very glad they didn't. Even if what they did end up doing wasn't very compelling, sort of petered out, I did like the fact that they didn't roll it back.
Yeah, me too. Because now they can, even though it wasn't the best resolution, now they can just put a pin in it and move forward, which I think is what they really need to do. Like the first season had some really good stuff. It also had some stuff that didn't really work. Hopefully they can, you know, huddle up and figure out what they want to keep and what they want to stop doing for season 2, and season 2 will be a smoother ride.
Maybe they can get it in fewer hands, because I know that the beginning credits is like 21 producers. It's like, there can't be 21 people producing this show.
No, and I have to say, credit where credit is due. Akiva Goldsman was a part of the writing and directing of this. He directed, I think, 1 episode, and he wrote 1 episode, and he was a producer.
Didn't he direct the final one?
He directed the last episode. And
he didn't suck out loud.
It's the first major project I've ever seen where he was involved that wasn't fucking terrible. So maybe he's finally, you know, gotten to a point.
Maybe 4 of the producers' jobs were to control him.
That's why they had so many. Like, oh, this guy has the worst ideas. Just keep him over there.
It's your turn to distract him, Joe.
It turns out maybe he's an okay director. Maybe just let someone else write it and then put him behind the camera and say, maybe that's the secret.
Maybe. All right. Yeah. Well, we're pushing 3 hours. We're into the third hour here because we started at like 1 o'clock and it's 2:45 now.
Yeah.
So
well, we better wrap her up.
Yeah, it got a little long, but that happens when we get blathering about this stuff.
Well, we talked about sports, we complained about Trump, we got into Star Trek. It's a miracle that we're done now. It's a miracle that we're not just noticing. Well, Jesus, we've been streaming for 6 hours.
This is a classic show. This is like the template right here.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, yeah. Let's call an end to these festivities. What do you say?
I say it's a good plan. How do you wear the cap all the time? This is bothering me a little bit having it on. I'm not used to it.
Well, that's the secret. You get used to it.
Yeah. I'm probably not going to wear it enough to get used to it.
You just never take it off, ever.
Not even in the shower?
No, you put a cap over it. You put a shower cap over it.
You put a cap over your cap.
This is one of my favorite. I think it's one of my favorite running.
You put your Orioles cap over your Suns cap.
Yeah,
to keep
exactly.
The Suns cap dry.
Yeah, because I want to keep the Suns cap nice. The Orioles cap, who gives a fuck? Suns finish out of the second division every once in a while. No, it's one of my favorite running jokes in Stephen Stuffy that even though I think I have taken it off for a Stephen Stuffy episode once or twice, but usually it's like I'll do a scene where like I'm in my pajamas but I still have the hat on, or my favorite was when I got scared by a bug in the shower and I came running out with a towel like I had just gotten out of the shower and I still had the hat on. So I don't know,
there is something kind of amusing about that, especially when you never ever draw any explicit attention to it. It's just there if you notice it.
You don't point to it, because if you point to it, then it kills it.
Yeah, some of the best things are funny simply because they're there and you have to notice.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's why Leslie Nielsen was so funny in Airplane, because he never winked. He played it completely straight. He never let you know that he thought any of it was funny.
Yeah.
All right.
So another episode down. We'll come up with something for March.
Yeah, I guess we probably should at some point.
Yeah, probably by the time we get into March, I would think.
Yeah. March would be a good time to start thinking about the March show. Yes, I agree.
Yeah, and at least we've done so many topics that are so serious. We wanted to do something a little bit more lighthearted, and of course, sports and slavery and racism came up because that's just the way that things go. We'll start making everything about race when race stops involving itself in everything. Yeah,
exactly. We'll make that deal with you, gentle viewer. Once race is no longer an issue in everyday life, in every facet of human existence, then we won't talk about it so much.
All right, and until then, I guess we're done until next month.
Yep.
And we'll see you in March, and we'll get the links posted once we have a topic and a date, which at this time we don't have anything.
Yeah, to be determined.
Probably on a Sunday at 1 p.m. at some point.
Yeah, I would think that's when we'll do it. That seems like our time slot.
We've been pretty consistent on that, so you think it's probably going to happen again? Or are we going to mix it up at some point just to confuse people?
We'll do the next one on a Thursday at 3 a.m., just, for the hell of it. Just for
probably
fun.
Have more viewers, just a random chance. All the people who are insomniacs happen to see something streaming. It's like, what the hell is this?
All the people who are tired of gaming and they're about to go to bed, and then they're like, wait a minute. Angry insomniac gamers. That should be our audience. That should be the audience that we go for. Anyway.
Hey, look, white guys are discussing something. I'm here.
They're not angry enough. This is bullshit. Why aren't they screaming and yelling about minorities?
They sound like they're actually defending them at times. What the hell?
This is an interesting show, but could you make it about how women are responsible for everything bad? I could really get into that.
We'll get right on that, folks.
Yeah. I can't jerk off to this. Anyway, on that note,
that's a great last line there, Steve. That's
thank you very much. I'm just saying that's the kind of people they are. All right, Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.